How would you know if a nuclear war were going off right now? Well, you'd probably be thinking that missiles would be flying through the air and everyone would be seeing mushroom clouds. Well, nuclear missiles are just one way of delivering a nuclear payload. There are other ways, more exotic ways. And in this case, I'm thinking about scalar beam technology. And this is a means to generate artificial earthquakes, especially under, say, an enemy country's territory. And when you generate artificial earthquakes, you can deliver effectively very high magnitude nuclear blasts. They're subsurface, they show up as a seismic signature. And as a result of this, even if a country knows it's been attacked, it might not even acknowledge it, okay? They won't acknowledge it one way or the other, they'll just remain silent. So we have that going on right now, and there are many earthquakes that have occurred, especially over the recent period, the past several years or so, which have in fact been very artificial, okay? They've constituted attacks. And I'm going to get into this kind of technology in this video. I'm firstly going to start out by looking at nuclear weapons themselves, conventional warheads, and I'm going to get into some of the esoteric secrets regarding these systems, okay? Because nuclear weapons, in order to function at an optimum, rely upon the position of the sun in the sky, okay? The very sun ground position as mapped onto the earth relative to the device when it is activated actually interferes with its yield. So they have to be very carefully positioned and set off at certain times to function correctly. The same is true of generating earthquakes via scalar beam technology. You have to very carefully generate them at certain times and locations in order to get the same boosting effect. So what this means is, all artificial earthquakes have a certain fingerprint, a signature that betrays them, so that you know that they are not, in fact, natural. And I'm going to talk about several instances of earthquakes in particular over the past 12 months or so. And in this case, the major focus is going to be on North Korea's nuclear weapons systems and their development of scalar beam technology to generate earthquakes, and also the earthquakes that have occurred in the United States. The one on the 4th of July, their Independence Day, and also 2 days later on the 6th of July, and this is 2019, just 6 months or so ago. Both of those two earthquakes occurred right on the doorstep, effectively, of a very important naval weapons base, a research facility, and they were pretty much instrumental in devastating this particular base. I'm going to show you and build a case for the fact that those two events, those two earthquakes that occurred in the US in July, were an attack that was conducted by North Korea, and they've effectively put their signature to the event. So when people actually do trigger these earthquakes, they position them in such a way and do them at certain times, almost to encode the fact that, to reveal the attacker to the person that's, or the country that's being attacked, okay? It's almost like schoolboy level, how should I put it? It's like out of a John le Carré novel. They engage in certain subtle messages that they encode along with their attacks. And so we've got a lot of that going on, and so that's what I'm going to get into in this video. Now, it is a very lengthy video, and it touches upon topics that are mentioned in my book called Physics. And if you want to know more, obviously go to my website, the link is in the description. And in this video then, I realised, because it's lengthy, maybe a lot of you won't get to the end of it, but for those that do, it does really reveal some high-level esoteric secrets regarding nuclear weapons. So it's very much the theme of my research. So hopefully for those who are really interested in this kind of work, you will definitely get something from this video. With that said then, let's get on with it. So in order to understand nuclear weapons then, I'm going to first start out by looking at certain special military facilities around the world, and the specific relations between these facilities helps to explain a very important aspect of how nuclear weapons function. In this case, we're looking at two surveillance sites that are manned by the United States but based in separate countries. And this one you can see on the screen is the first one. This is Menwith Hill. And this is a US base run by the NSA, that's the National Security Agency. And this is in the UK, in England. And you can see the latitude and longitude coordinates here. So this is Google Earth, so anybody can zoom in and you'll see exactly the same image. And this basically is a surveillance site that is concerned with intercepting phone calls, faxes, emails, all kinds of electronic signals being transmitted around. And you can see the large golf balls, if you will, these items here. These are the radomes, okay? And the site's dotted around with them. Now, this particular site, then, is part of this echelon matrix. There's quite a few of these sites linked around the world, and they're all very carefully sited. So the sister site to this one, then, is in Australia, and this is called Pine Gap. Right, this is in Pine Gap, almost dead on central Australia. And you can see here again the radomes, large building complex, and we've got the latitude and longitude site. Now, in this particular instance then, an interesting point regarding this site is that they have built a shaft some 5.3 miles deep underground, okay, at the site itself, 5.3 miles. And this is actually, in a way, it's very much allied to or linked into Tesla's facility that he was building at Wardenclyffe Tower. He designed a shaft that would go directly into the earth, and this was part of his power station. So, part of this site here, it's not just surveillance, it's also designed to generate power by resonating with the earth itself, okay? So this shaft contains some specialist equipment that allows for vibrations to be sent backwards and forwards in order to establish key frequencies that resonate with the earth. Now, in order to understand this, you can see that the siting of this facility here at Pine Gap is linked in a very special way to the Menwith Hill site and also via the frequency cycle of the US power grid. If you look at this particular set of diagrams here, this is basically two images of the Earth trying to show you the great circle arc length over the ellipsoid Earth that links up both sites. So again, you've got the Menwith Hill one here with the latitude and longitude coordinates, and you've got Pine Gap, and this is the base here, Central Australia, latitude, longitude. So if you look at the Great Circle Arc that goes all the way from the site here in England, it goes all the way across here, Europe and Asia, and from this other diagram you can see the rest of the line connecting up here. So, in order to work out then the precise arc length distance between these sites, you'll need a Great Circle calculator. Now this is the one I use for much of the work I do on the internet. This is by Ed Williams, and basically you've got two coordinate pairings here, latitude and longitude for one item and latitude and longitude for another. So if you put in the coordinates just listed on the other page and you were to press compute, in this case we're looking at the WGS84 model, you get the distance, okay? So let's just do this with respect to these coordinates. I'm going to show you on this screen here the precise arc separation between them and also a special relationship to the Earth. So the first things first then, if we use the most advanced Earth ellipsoid model, then the separation between the two sites is this figure here, the 9,338 mile figure. And again, this is very accurate to 6 places after the decimal point, okay? So it's very accurate. Now these are normal statute miles, so each mile is 5,280 feet, okay? So next we look at the equatorial circumference of the Earth, and this is the value here in miles, okay? This is a circular value, the equatorial circumference. So a simple ratio that we have, if we basically divide one by the other, we get this. Equatorial circumference divided by the arc separating them, and we get this sequence here, 2.6665, and you can see how close it is, almost dead on to this sequence here, which is the basic fraction 8/3, okay, if it were recurring sixes all the way. Now, why is this important? What is so special about this relationship existing here? It's one that very basically ties in harmoniously the arc distance between the two sites and the equatorial circumference of the Earth. Well, why is this? Well, if we go further, we can see the answer. because of this ratio here, 8 divided by 3, what this means is, if we take the circumference of the Earth and divide by 8, the value we get is this in miles. If we take the lesser value here, the value linking up both sides, and divide by 3, we get the same value effectively, only a slight difference. It's like a harmonious relationship. So this value here effectively fits harmoniously into both of these values. But what's so special about this value? Well, here's how it ties into the US power grid. In order to work out the frequency accompanying a certain wavelength, you take the speed of light here, 186,282 miles per second, this is in a vacuum, and if you divide it by a distance for the wavelength, you get the frequency here. And you can see that the frequency accompanying this particular wavelength measure here, and the value I've used here in the equation here is just the mean of these two values, just for the sake of argument. You can see how close it is to exactly an ideal frequency of 60, and 60 is the frequency of the US power grid. So what they are doing with this special shaft at Pine Gap is generating this specific frequency so that it resonates with the Earth, and it also links up to the site in Menwith Hill. Okay, so there's a certain power-based connection here between both sites. Now, this has quite an interesting crossover into nuclear weapons. Okay, so let's have a look at a nice chart here. This is just a basic chart of nuclear weapons tests for the United States, and it's beginning in 1945, and you can see on screen here it goes all the way to 1953 at test number 35. So the first one is Trinity. This was 1945, 16th of July. You'll see this next one, Alberta series, Little Boy and Fat Man. That's the attack on Hiroshima. Little Boy and Fat Man is on Nagasaki. These are the wartime bombs, okay? And you go all the way down, you can just see towards the end of the list, at least on the screen, Mike and King. Mike, if you look across here, you can see where it says 10,400. As a yield, the yield here is in kilotons. So the first test is the atom bomb, 21,000 tons of TNT. And you can see here, this is 10,400 kilotons. Basically 10.4 megatons. This is the first thermonuclear device. King that follows on after is the highest yield pure fission device. Mike is the first thermonuclear device. So these are the ones listed here. Now, I'm going to show you a few special relations existing between 6 different nuclear bombs. Most of them are US tests, but we're going to look at others as well. Now, you can see that with these archives here, and these are just declassified nuclear archives for the US, you can see we've got latitude and longitude for where the bombs were at the precise moment they were detonated. And we also have the precise times when the devices went off, again to the nearest second, okay? Now, in the examples when I was looking at the two echelon matrix sites here, Menwith Hill and Pine Gap, I was looking at the arc lengths connecting them over the Great Circle. In order to do the evaluation, I need the precise latitude and longitude coordinates. Well, you can evaluate nuclear weapons in the same way, and you do this by way of looking at the precise coordinates of where the bomb is when it goes off. But the second coordinate you are looking at is the position of the sun. The precise ground coordinates, latitude and longitude, present when the bomb goes off at the specified time. And you can find that there are several great circle arc lengths over the surface of the Earth connecting the bomb to the sun at the moment of detonation, which encode various special harmonic measures or wavelength units which fit in harmoniously into these great circle arcs, which reveals that resonance is a factor in actually contributing to successfully detonating nuclear devices. In this next diagram here, these are 2 images taken straight from my book Occult Physics, where I detail the specific arc lengths of great importance. So, if we look firstly at the diagram here on the left, there are 2 labels, right? And we've got the sun here. This is the image of the sun. And this here is the designation of a bomb. This is just a test example, basically, a template. So you can imagine then that if a bomb is placed at a certain point on the Earth, at a certain time, using this template as an example, here is the bomb at a significant latitude north of the equator, okay? This dashed line here is the equator. Imagine the bomb is triggered as a test here. If you freeze the solar system and you freeze all the motions of the planets, freeze the rotation of the Earth, okay, then at that moment you could draw a straight line from the centre of the Earth out to the centre of the Sun, and that line will pierce through the surface of the Earth, and this gives you the coordinates of the Sun, or the Sun ground position, as I label it here, okay? So at that instantaneous moment then, you have established certain arc length measures connecting up the bomb to the Sun over the surface of the Earth. And what I do in these two diagrams is I show you the relevant ones of significance. Firstly, there's the direct arc connecting the bomb to the Sun. Example here is this line D, direct arc. Then we have the pure latitude separation between the bomb and the Sun. And that's between this line here and this line here. These are basically circles that are parallel to the equatorial circumference of the Earth, which itself is circular. So even though they're not on the same longitude, we're just looking at the pure latitude separation between them, okay? So this is like a section of a meridian arc of the full polar circumference, if you will. So that's the second line of significance. And then we go over here, and this is primarily detailing this E longitude arc, which is circular. Okay, this is the arc of separation between the bomb and the Sun at the equator, okay? It's the section here of the equator between the longitude of the bomb and the Sun. It's another great circle arc. You can also separately find significance sometimes between the straight out arc length from the equator to the bomb or from the equator to the Sun, and they could be switched. The bomb could be in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, and vice versa for the Sun. So, when you're evaluating nuclear weapons then, you basically need to look at the nuclear archives we've got for when a test has been carried out or when a wartime bomb is used, and you put the precise coordinates for where the bomb is when it's detonated into a great circle calculator, and you then use some separate astronomical software to work out the position of the Sun, the latitude-longitude coordinates of the Sun on the ground when the bomb is detonated at a certain time. So you need that precise time to the nearest second to work out the coordinates of the Sun on the ground. Now, we can use a great circle calculator to figure out the calculation itself, okay? And the archives tell us the location of the bomb. This is the program that I use to work out the precise location of the Sun on the ground, latitude and longitude, when a bomb is exploded. This is the US Naval Observatory's own software. It's called the Interactive Computer Ephemeris, or ICE for short. And in here, the computer program gives you values for what is known as Greenwich hour angle. And this is the movement westwards from the prime meridian. It's the equivalent of longitude, westwards from the prime meridian. So it goes from 0 westwards to 360 degrees all the way around. But you could split it up into 180 degrees west or up to 180 degrees east, okay? This will also tell you the declination of the Sun in terms of a geocentric angle. You'll need to use a separate formula to convert the geocentric declination value here into the geodetic declination value. But by the by, and I don't want to get too technical, I want to get into the analysis here, so I'm going to do all the calculations in behind the scenes and just show you what the great circle arc measures are associated with various bombs. So I want to show you then something very important, and I'm going to pick some of the most prominent nuclear tests throughout history, okay? With just a small selection of bombs, you find amazing basic ratios linking up the various arc length components of the tests, even done over different times. So here then is the first bomb I want to consider, and this is the one I mentioned in the list before. This is codenamed King, and this is a US test here that was conducted on the 15th of November 1952. We've got the precise time here, universal time. This is 23 hours 30 minutes, and this is half a megaton, okay? 500,000 tons of TNT yield, okay? So based upon this time here then, based upon the nuclear archives taken direct, we have the latitude and longitude of the bomb, and you can see in this diagram here, that's where the bomb is. And the site is Eniwetok Atoll. It's, the proverbial island in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific. So that's where the bomb is. And then the ICE software allows us to calculate where the sun is, latitude and longitude here. And this is the sun point here. You can almost imagine the center here as the center of the Earth. And this is a dashed line that comes out from the center of the Earth out into space. And it pierces through the surface, and that's where the bomb is, the coordinates there, as given here. And same, this is where the line connects the centre of the sun to the centre of the Earth, piercing through the Earth, and that's the coordinates of the sun right here. So, there are three types of arc measures that I've brought up on screen. The direct arc is the only one depicted in this diagram. So this is over the ellipsoid Earth form connecting up the bomb to the sun. And it's in miles, again 5 places after the decimal point. The latitude arc of separation and the longitude arc are also given, but they are not the focus of this particular analysis, okay? So this here then is what we have for King, and that is the arc length I want to look at. I want to look at it with respect to another device of great significance, and that is the following one. This is the test known as Bravo. And this is a really historical test, this one. This is on record as the highest yield test the United States has ever conducted, period. And this was part of Operation Castle, the 28th of February 1954, 18 hours 45 minutes universal time. And this was a whopping 15 megatons, okay? So at this precise time, the bomb was set up at these coordinates. This is at Bikini Atoll. It's close to Eniwetok, but it's significantly removed. Again, it's an island in the Pacific. So that's where the bomb's set up. And at the precise time, the sun is located at these coordinates, right here. And again, this is just a depiction of the Great Circle arc connecting up both of them at the moment that the bomb is actually detonated. So here then we've got the three arc measures, but the only one depicted is the one in orange here. This is 6,781 miles. So, let's have a look at both of them together. Bravo and King. A simple division of these values to find the ratio reveals the following. If we divide the Bravo arc and the King arc, we get 2.66662, an ideal of 2.6 recurring. Does that look familiar, ladies and gentlemen? It's the exact same ratio that links up the equatorial circumference of the Earth to the line connecting up Menwith Hill and Pine Gap. And as I pointed out there, what that means is there is a certain wavelength unit that harmoniously fits into both measures, implying that they are making use of resonance, amplification or frequency matching. And this is one of the things that is done when nuclear bombs are actually detonated. Resonance is used to actually ensure that the bombs operate predictably and that the yield is as expected. It's one of the secrets, you see, of nuclear bombs. The way it works, and this is what I go into in some detail in my book, Occult Physics. When you have a nuclear bomb, you'll obviously have, say, a measure of plutonium. You will have various shaped charges around it, and what they usually do is they fire the conventional explosive shaped charges all around a spherical plutonium core. This implodes the core. They then bombard the core at just the right moment with neutrons, and this causes a fracturing or fission of the atoms. It splits the atoms, releasing energy, and this is all done in the merest fraction of a second, okay? When this is achieved then,
a certain measure of energy is released, and the scientists, based upon the bomb design and all the chemicals and all the processes involved, everything that occurs in a cascading fashion when the device is activated, they have an on-paper calculation for how much energy is produced and the power of the explosion. However, that's not the whole story. Resonance is used in order to actually help boost the device to ensure that it functions at an optimum. And what I mean by that is, resonance is all about amplification. That is where you have, say, an object composed of certain dimensions, and let's say you impinge upon it with certain waveforms, right? You've got an energetic waveform disturbance that strikes the object. Well, all waveforms have a wavelength which is accompanying a certain frequency. So if the wavelength fits in to the object, the target object, a whole number of times, it reflects inside it internally and causes the object to become agitated. Think of a glass in a controlled container which is bombarded with sound waves. If you get the sound waves at the right wavelength and frequency, that the wavelengths of the sound waves striking the glass, if they touch the certain critical wavelengths associated with its structure, the glass starts to wobble and become unstable, and if you put in enough power, it shatters. This is what happens when nuclear weapons are activated. There is two aspects to it. On the one hand, they activate the device, producing a certain effect which releases a certain energy. But they also activate the device at certain critical points in space and time when there are certain special arc distances between the sun and the device on the ground. Because what they are looking for are certain wavelength measures that harmoniously fit inside these critical great circle arcs, primarily the three that you see listed on screen. Because the sun is basically emitting certain waveforms, and they seek harmonization with those waveforms. So when you start evaluating bombs, you find the same relations as you get on screen here between such as King and Bravo. You find if you look at the arc measure connecting the bomb to the sun for one test, say via one of these measures, you find that it will have basic ratio connections to the arc lengths of another test. And what this reveals is that you have some sort of special resonant association. It means that they are working with certain frequencies and certain wavelengths, and there are core wavelength units, a special series, which are employed in all nuclear tests that harmoniously fit in to these great circle arcs between the bomb and the sun when they are activated. What this implies is that nuclear tests, nuclear bombs, they're not just triggered at random points on the Earth at random times, okay? You will have a certain special signature, if you will, an energetic signature where you have special relations tying the location of the bomb to the sun at the moment that they are activated. So this almost allows you to be able to confirm even whether an explosion is conventional or nuclear, because if it's purely conventional, it won't have any special sun relationship, okay? But let's move on then just to another example, and this is a very prominent one in history. And this allows us to really understand something about the high precision in terms of timing when to activate bombs. Here we are looking at the bomb that was used to destroy the Japanese city of Hiroshima, and this was an attack by the United States in World War II. According to the archives, the ones just on screen that I showed you earlier, the precise time of the device, universal time when it went off, 23 hours, 16 minutes and 2 seconds, and this was the 5th of August 1945. The yield here is quite modest, 15,000 tons of TNT, although it did, a single bomb, devastate the city. You can see here then, we also have the bomb coordinates. These are the precise coordinates of where the bomb was when it exploded, just slightly above ground, for an atmospheric test. We also have the sun coordinates here. They are calculated using the ICE software. Now in this instance then, what I've got here in the diagram is a depiction of just one of these critical arc lengths, and that is the longitude separation arc between the bomb and the sun at the equator. It's as if, basically, you put these two values here, the longitude of the bomb and the longitude of the sun into a great circle calculator and leave the latitude fields 0. And if you do this, you work out the arc section on the plane of the equator that separates the bomb from the sun, okay? So even though they're on different latitudes, it doesn't matter. You are just looking at the great circle arc on the plane of the equator at the very moment the device is activated. In this case then, the precise answer we've got from the calculation is this here, just slightly over 4,150 statute miles. So again, let's have a look at a special ratio that appears to be present. If we do a division sum, we get the following. Equatorial circumference divided by longitudinal separation arc of the equator, and we get this value. Almost dead on the number 6. And the error rate here is only some 1,740 feet. What that means is, if we were to just take the equatorial circumference of the Earth here and divide by 6, and then subtract the answer from this value here, we would get an error rate corresponding to just 1,740 feet, about a third of a mile. Now, why is this so significant? Well, you really need to think about this one, guys. This is an astounding thing. This is an attack by a B-29 bomber. So the pilot is flying at high altitude, and this is a free-fall bomb drop. When he approaches the target at a certain speed, certain height, and releases the bomb is going to fall forward slightly as it's going downwards. The bomb is in the air for 43 seconds. Again, this is one of those facts that you can easily check. Okay? It's quite notable for history, this event. So, the bomb is in the air for 43 seconds. What is happening during those 43 seconds is the Earth's rotating on its axis. And at the equator, the longitude position of the Sun is moving over the equator at a rate of 1,522 feet per second. So if you multiply that by 43, you will get the movement of the Sun at the equator for the entire duration that the bomb is in the air and falls from when it's released to when it explodes. Now the very fact that we've got an error rate here of about 1,743 feet from perfection of this 6-to-1 ratio means that we had a synchronization here with regards to this attack. The pilot was under strict orders to release the bomb such that when it fell and was just above ground at these coordinates here, just about to explode, when it did explode, as near to perfection as possible, they wanted this arc length here, the longitudinal separation at the equator between the Sun and the bomb, to be almost dead on, this 1:6 ratio. Why? Because it's necessary such that the bomb interacts with these resonant waveforms which converge on the bomb at the critical moment it is activated. It's like the glass being shattered in that control condition. The external waves interacting with the glass contribute to the destruction of the glass, making it more violent, if you can see. So when a bomb is activated, it creates a certain energetic condition such that it is receptive to being destroyed by the waveforms that converge on it at the critical moment, as link the bomb to the Sun. So this is the kind of thing that's going on when bombs are triggered. This is why they all have a certain special signature, a certain set of special ratios and wavelengths that connect the bomb to the Sun whenever they are triggered, okay? Now, this means that each bomb has a certain fingerprint, if you will. And bearing all this in mind then, we can now go on to evaluate something very real world in terms of a threat posed, say, by a certain country. In this case, North Korea. So what I want to do then, in light of everything I've told you about nuclear bombs and some of the mysteries associated with them, I'm going to show you some information regarding the weapons capabilities of North Korea. And not just with regards to nuclear weapons themselves, but also other, even more exotic technologies. So let's have a look then at the nuclear weapons program of North Korea. Now, firstly then, you can see here then, according to this map here, it depicts the nuclear test site used by the Koreans, ruled by Kim Jong-un at the moment, right? So this here, northeast of the country, is where their main test site is. And I've got a list together here I've compiled of the 6 tests that they've done at that site up to present, which began in 2006 to 2017. Now, these tests then, you'll notice I've also got yield values and Richter scale values. The USGS, the US Geological Survey, they register earthquakes, and there's a certain monitoring program going off globally, whereby if any seismic activity is detected, it's evaluated to see if it might well be a nuclear test. And the USGS actually has a snapshot image of the precise coordinates of the nuclear tests of North Korea and the precise times. And they give Richter scale values, energy values, as seismic signatures, like as if they were earthquakes. And you can use a formula, and the formula is this one on screen here. It's not my formula, it's taken by a research think tank who did an in-depth analysis of the North Korean nuclear tests. So, if you use this formula, you can actually convert or transform the Richter scale energy values as registered as earthquakes or seismic signatures into nuclear yields of TNT. And this is what you get for all 6 tests, okay? Now I've also got in the bottom part of the screen here a few well-known nuclear devices just for comparison purposes. So the first test then produced a 4.3 energy Richter scale value. This was in 2006, 9th of October, and this was only a very low kind of yield, okay? 1,094 tons. About 3 years later was the next test in 2009, slightly bigger, again 2819, and then another 4 years. Again, it's quite a time lag between different tests here. But 2013 you get 5.1 signature, 7200 or so, and then 2016, 3 years later, again January, you get again the same value, and then we get slightly bigger, 5.3. 9th of September 2016, and this is where we start to get close to Hiroshima. And it was then, just 1 year later, 3rd of September, that we had a 6.3 registered seismic signature, and that gave us this yield here, a very significant jump. And this is where people are now sure that he's gone from pure fission bombs to thermonuclear bombs, a higher class which allows you to get into the ranges of megatons, millions of tons of TNT, like you can see with Bravo and Tsar Bomber. The Bravo test, as I mentioned, is the highest yield US test conducted, 15 megatons. Tsar Bomber, which means King of Bombs, is the Russian test, which was 58 megatons, their biggest device. They detonated. That was on the 30th of October 1961. So this is where we stand then with the North Korean nuclear tests. So let's just go a bit further. What you're looking at here is a Chinese test, and it just says ID21. Unlike the US or us British here, the Chinese, they didn't come up with fancy names for their tests, you know. They didn't have these fancy code names, they just numbered them like, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So this is just the 21st test that they conducted since when they began their program. And this occurred on the 17th of November 1976. 6 hours, 0 minutes, 13 seconds universal time. This is 4 megatons, and this was done at their site at Lop Nur here. This is the highest yield Chinese test ever conducted. So the bomb positioned here, you can see in China, was at these coordinates. That's where their test site is. Precisely though at these coordinates at that time. And at that time the sun was precisely at these coordinates. Now you can see I've put the sun here on the actual image. That's where it was, but I'm not really concerned about the sun here, because in this case we're looking at the pure arc length measure from the equator to the bomb, not from the bomb to the sun. So this is not a latitude separation between the bomb and the sun. It's between the equator and the bomb, which is also another significant arc measure which encodes certain harmonic frequencies. So in this case then, the arc length, which is part of the meridian arc, okay, is equal to just slightly over 2,800 miles. But this is the exacting figure to 5 places, okay? Now, the reason I'm showing you this China test is because there's quite a relationship between China and North Korea. And the North Koreans, when they first started doing their nuclear tests, they based heavily the harmonics of their tests on the Chinese with their first test. I'm just going to show you this right now. This here then is what we have for the North Korean test from the 9th of October 2006, okay? This is the precise time of the device when it was activated. We know this because this is taken from the USGS. This is their seismic signature. The minute you detect the signature, you can work out the precise time through waves travelling through the ground. So they know exactly where the bomb is to high accuracy. They can triangulate and figure out the location at his nuclear test site. And they also know the exact time it went off, which is all you need to do the analysis, okay? So we can put the time in, work out with the ICE software precisely where the sun is, and look at where the bomb is, and work out these 3 arc measures, okay? So, let's have a look. In this case then, we have a relationship between this equator to bomb for the Chinese test separately linked into each of these 2 values here. And on screen they are as follows. You can see here, if we divide the 2800 by the 3600 value here, this is the direct arc between the sun and the bomb for the Korea test. Look at the sequence. 0.7777, it's almost perfect, 7s all the way. And this is the basic fraction, 7 divided by 9. And the error rate here, just 1236 feet. So that means, again, if we just modify this value here by 1236 feet and then divide it by that, this ratio, instead of being slightly off, is perfect. And we've got a similar situation here. In this case, we're looking at the pure latitude arc between the bomb and the sun. That's at the nuclear test site. And it's this value here, latitude arc divided by equator to bomb for China. And then you get this sequence here, 1.1 and almost 6 as perfect recurring. Calculated error here is only 59 feet. So the fraction between these 2 values here, 7 divided by 6. And what it implies is, if you take, by way of example this one here, if you take the 2800 value and divide that by 6, and you take the value of 3267 and divide by 7, you will get the same value, right? The same arc length value, which is a wavelength unit, which is of significance in that it's conducive, linking the sun to the bombs at the moment they are activated. It's a harmonic fit which gives you resonant amplification, which is necessary to boost the yields of the nuclear devices. So this is what they were working with. And it's important again to stress, guys, that when you're looking at all these values here, right, they're all dynamically established, right? In other words, the precise second that a bomb is activated, right, the values, all of these latitude and longitude and direct arc values for all the tests, they are fixed in time momentarily. Because for every second of time that passes, with the Earth rotating, all these values are dynamically shifting by 1,522 feet at the equator. That's the value per second, right, of time, 1,522 feet. So when I'm showing you these error rates here, I'm trying to really ram home the point that in order to establish these ratios as accurately as possible, it requires split-second timing in triggering the devices, okay? Split-second timing, triggering them at certain locations to achieve the matching amplification effect with a resonant effect. Because there are only, a certain set of wavelength measures which are conducive, and they use them again and again with various different tests. This then is an evaluation of the first North Korean test. I'm not going to go through them all. I'm just showing you the first one here. just to show you how, when countries start testing, they have to use certain special ratios, and you'll find connections between different tests over time. Now, in looking then at the North Korean nuclear capabilities, you've got to think on there's two aspects to this. You're developing actual warheads, okay, that you want to use against some enemy, okay? They're an actual device. You then want a delivery system, in which case you want to have some sort of missile, Put your warheads on your missile and fire them to a target. There are other ways, though, to deliver nuclear yield blasts. And this is where we get into some exotic technology, which is linked into beam weapons. And so we're just going to switch topics here. Now, these are sections of text and some diagrams from my website Occult Physics, where I discuss scalar waves, okay? A specific type of wave which can be weaponized and used as a delivery system to target an enemy with nuclear yield blasts. Now, this is where we get into some high-level esoteric stuff, but this is a physics that's related to nuclear weapons. So firstly, what is a scalar wave? Well, these diagrams here are taken from a book by Thomas Bearden, which is called Fer-de-Lance. He wrote many books on free energy subjects and exotic weapons technology, and he was in the US military. So these are the diagrams that he uses to explain how scalar waves are generated and also how they are essentially weaponized. Now, basically, we think of normal light waves, so the electromagnetic spectrum. They've got magnetic and electric fields at 90 degrees to one another. If you've got a standard like laser beam of electromagnetic waves, then it travels at the speed of light. And let's say you wanted to target some matter with it. You might strike your beam and it'll hit some matter, but it won't go far into the matter. It might start to burn it if it's a bit of an intense and high frequency beam, but that's about it. So you can see that standard laser beams and standard light waves have certain properties. Now, how do you generate a scalar beam? And the answer is, you combine two electromagnetic waves and you put them out of phase 180 degrees. So it's a case of almost destructive interference, as they call it. So you can see in the diagram here, if you've got a wave going up and down here, and you combine it with another wave and make the second wave go down when the one at the top goes up, and then it goes up here where the one goes down, you vector sum them to zero, okay? So what happens then is you combine the waves in this way, and the electric and magnetic components appear to be nullified. So if you've got some kind of device and you generate two electromagnetic waves in it, and you put them out of phase 180 degrees, what's coming out of the end of your device? You will register zero electric, zero magnetic fields. You might even think that nothing is coming out of your device. There's no beam coming out at all. Okay, you've kind of nullified it. But this is not true. You've created a beam of a different quality, and this is a scalar beam. And this is a stress level on space-time. You've created a new type of beam which enfolds the electric and magnetic components. You haven't nullified them so they don't exist. You've enfolded them. Now this new type of beam here is a longitudinal type beam, and this has a speed almost instantaneously. It's far in excess of the speed of light, this new type of beam. But to be sure that you have still got your electric and magnetic effects, in order to actually prove this, well, what you do is, and you can see in the diagram here on the right, if you generate a scalar beam from one site here, and you generate a scalar beam from another site, you might think that there's nothing coming out of your beams. But if you interfere them at a distance, then in that interference zone, the electric and magnetic effects re-emerge. Now, the other interesting thing about scalar beams is that they don't interact much with matter at all. So whereas with a standard electromagnetic laser type beam, if you try firing that into the earth, it'll be killed off practically the moment the beam hits the ground. It won't penetrate at all, really. Whereas a scalar beam, if you fire one of these beams that you've just generated, it'll fly straight through the Earth as if it's not even there and come straight out the other side of the planet, almost instantly. So, what you are able to do with scalar beams then is interfere them, not just, say, in the atmosphere, that is, above the surface of the Earth. You could actually interfere the beams from two sites, widely separated. You could interfere them underground, and you will have the electromagnetic effects emerge. And they can be explosively powerful, these effects, when they re-emerge. But not only that, they can produce effects which are exothermic, expanding spheres of energy. This is the visuals of what. If you do this, say, atmospheric, and you interfere them, you can get powerful, large, expanding spheres of light. You can also produce implosion effects. And these, it's where the spheres almost, or the effects are created from the outside going in, and they produce cold effects rather than heat effects. And these are exothermic effects. These are the terms that Bearden uses. Now, these then scalar beams have been weaponized, and this is something that's kind of on record. It's just not well discussed, but the Soviet Union weaponized these going to the 60s, 70s and 80s, which brings me to the next slide. This here is a depiction from the book Ferdinand by Thomas Bearden, what I've just mentioned. It says Briefing on Soviet Scalar Electromagnetic Weapons. Now, these little parts here, they're actually direct text citations from it. And this diagram here, I've replicated it in colour, but it's replicating a diagram that is on page 54, as you can see here. And the Soviets did a lot of tests of these out at sea, okay, to the east of their country. And they were sighted many times during the 80s, strange glowing balls of light. They became so frequently sighted and reported that people just stopped reporting them. But they had a lot of expert eyewitnesses. Civilian pilots saw them and reported on them. And this, again, fed its way into the Western intelligence services. So the Soviets were testing strange new weapons. And in one depiction here, what you found was, as you can see here, a sequence of events. A geyser of water rose rapidly from the surface. That's what this almost like mushroom cloud thing looks like, okay? It reached 60,000 feet altitude in about 2 minutes. And then a brilliantly glowing small globe appeared on the top of the cloud. And the globe increased greatly in size and altitude and reached a diameter of about 380 miles. So this is the kind of stuff that people are seeing. Passengers, from civilian planes, they were seeing all this stuff going out of the ocean. The Soviets were testing all kinds of exotic equipment. And what they were doing here, and what Bearden goes on to describe, is they were testing their scalar beam weapons by interfering the beams at certain key distances out at sea. And when the electromagnetic effects re-emerged, they were creating these massive, powerful, glowing spheres. And they could also create effects with the water, which was revealed in these seeming mushroom clouds as well, which could be used to take out fleets of ships, okay? So you've got effects here that they're looking to disrupt ships at sea, but also, as Bearden mentions here, they were also used to knock out ICBMs, okay? If you've got a massive sphere, 380 miles, you could put that somewhere in the atmosphere, and if an ICBM's coming through it, you can take them out in that way. So this is the kind of stuff that they were coming out with, right? So again, you have these very powerful scalar beam facilities, and they are creating scalar beams by interfering electromagnetic waves, and they could have sites even several hundred miles apart. I mean, Russia's a big country, and you could basically interfere those beams close to the surface of the Earth, high above in the atmosphere, or even underground. And if you were to interfere them underground, you would register a seismic signature. In other words, you'd have an earthquake. You'll be able to generate earthquakes with this stuff. But, and here's the key thing, guys, when scalar beams are used, when they are interfered at precise coordinates, they do it in the same way as with nuclear weapons. They interfere them at critical points in time and space and time both, so that when these spheres of light are emerging, there are special arc length measures linking up the sun to the target point of the interference zone, so that they can boost the blast with these special resonant frequencies. So what they do with their nuclear weapons, they do with scalar beams. And this means that when you evaluate these scalar beams, if you know the precise time and location of one, you will find one of those special nuclear type signatures, if you will. Okay, you'll find some sort of special correspondence between the great circle arc measures tying the sun to where the scalar beam bubble emerges and the arc measures associated, say, with nuclear tests. Now this has a bearing on North Korea because North Korea has developed this scalar beam weapons technology. They don't just have nuclear weapons as we know them from their standard tests that they've done at their nuclear site. They also have developed scalar beams, and the way in which they have tested them, especially underground, producing seismic signatures, we can evaluate those signatures and absolutely confirm this, that they have weaponized scalar beams in North Korea. So let's move on. A series of articles that came out in newspapers really strongly confirm this point. So here's the first one. This is from Daily Mail, and you can see it's dated the 1st of April 2014. Earthquake off coast of North Korea sparks fears that Kim Jong-un has carried out his threat to hold nuclear tests. A magnitude 5 tremor detected 80 miles off peninsula, 3:48 local time. Comes 2 days after the North threatened, and here's the critical term, guys. It comes 2 days after the North threatened a new form of atomic test. Very interesting language here. They're threatening a new form of atomic test. Now you can see in the diagram here, this is the epicenter of the 5.1 earthquake, and it's out to sea. So this is, miles underneath the seabed. So nobody's like got in a submarine and gone to the seabed and somehow drilled a hole miles and miles down and then put a physical nuke in. No. What has happened is he's got 2 sites set up in North Korea generating scalar beams, and he's intersected them underneath the ocean to generate or allow the re-emergence of the electromagnetic effects and trigger an earthquake. Okay? So this is what we had here, and this language, very interesting, new form of atomic test. So this is the 1st of April 2014. Let's go forwards in time. This one's the 12th of July 2017, a few years later. Breaking news. Has Kim set off another nuke? Magnitude 6.0 earthquake is detected off the coast of North Korea. This here is to the east of the peninsula. The other one was over here to the west. It says, the quake was very deep, 348 miles below the seabed, okay? And then it says, early speculation indicated quake was man-made. But then it goes on to say, as details of the incident emerged, it appeared to be a standard natural disaster. Not so. If you're using scalar beams, your beams will go right through the ocean, right through the earth, right through matter, as if it's not even there. And the emergence can occur deep underground. They are basically, them, the powers that be, it's certain interest groups are planting these stories in the press to try to reveal that he has indeed got some special weapon systems. So, let's have a look. Now this is from the USGS itself, okay? So this is what I'm talking about with regards to seismic signatures being detected. So there's one here and the other one is here. And these are the 2 signatures registered with the USGS, and the precise timestamps here are given for each one, and also the coordinates, again as events. Now, here's an interesting point, guys. The first point, these are both totally artificial. They're linked or they're registered as earthquakes, in that they are given as circular little blobs. When an explosion is registered and recorded at the USGS, they are represented by diamonds, okay? But if they think it's a natural earthquake, they go for little circles. So the USGS, in putting these circles on here, is basically saying, hey, we're signing off on these as being totally, natural earthquakes, but they're not. Now I want to draw your attention to something very interesting here. The timestamps of both of them. Okay? Let me make them bigger and put them on screen. The first one here, 2014. Look at the time of day, universal time. 19 hours, 48 minutes, 36 seconds. And this one here, 19 hours, 48 minutes, 8 seconds. I mean, what are the odds? They both begin 19 hours, 48 minutes. Why? Well, this is the interesting thing about these tests. When countries do them, they can be clever, okay? We're talking like public schoolboy cleverness, like out of a John le Carre spy book, okay? They like to encode information in the tests. These sites, both of these locations, are chosen because at the precise time and location they had certain special relations to the sun, okay? This was necessary for energetic purposes, because in order to actually produce these earthquakes, they required a boosting effect. And this is important, an extra point I need to mention regarding scalar beams. And I'm going to have to touch upon something important regarding earthquakes per se here. This is where I'm going to mention some of the things in my book. As a general point, okay, all of the planets are engaged in a continuous matter exchange at an instantaneous level, core to core. It's part of the balance mechanism of the solar system. You see, planets can increase their mass and grow, or they may decrease their mass and shrink. This is because you are getting matter continuously being exchanged between the Earth, the Sun, the Moon, all the other planets, okay? And they are increasing and decreasing various sizes. Now, ordinarily, the matter streams are kind of small, low level, and quite consistent. But as I pointed out, again looking at my website, I talk a lot about what is it that triggers natural earthquakes. And the answer is conjunction patterns. When you have certain special configurations involving conjunctions, this low-level matter exchange between the planets, you get sudden spikes, where you might get a burst of matter from, say, another planet, or say from the Sun, and it emerges at the core of the Earth. It's a matter spike, a big burst. And the waveform pattern here is of a special, you could say, a high frequency, a higher order than standard electromagnetic waves. And this matter burst emerges from the core, spirals around the planet, expanding outwards and roaming through and above and around the planet, like a roaming, degrading energy wave. And what happens is, the clever scientists out there who are on certain special projects, they know about this. They can detect these precursor energy waves. And so they know when one has occurred that there's a massive energy signal roaming around and degrading. It's a degrading pattern in that what it does is it goes from this higher order state to a low order state where it then interacts with the physical crust of the Earth near the surface. And this is what causes a natural earthquake to occur near some fault line. It's almost like a path of least resistance towards the most unstable area when this energy degrades. And it may take a few days from the initial blast or the initial burst of energy from the core as transmitted from some other planets when we have a conjunction. It may take several days, but it's these degrading waveforms, okay, that are what are responsible for natural earthquakes. Now, what the scientists do then with scalar beams is they'll have a couple of different sites. They'll generate a scalar beam at one and a scalar beam at another, and they will very precisely interfere them, say, below ground, and they will do it when there's one of these degrading energy waves in order to bleed off some of the energy, okay? So they create an energetic condition with the interference of the beams at the precise moment when these energy waves are roaming around. And they do it with this special relationship to the sun, so there's certain frequency matching of certain special frequencies connecting the sun to the interference zone. And this, like that opera singer shattering the glass, hitting the right frequency, it's that resonant harmonics which basically bleeds off and captures a lot of this energy from this degrading signal. And so we have a massive seismic signature. And so what they're actually doing is they're not generating the total amount of energy for the earthquake from the energy pumped in at each scalar beam device. They are actually only inputting a modest measure of energy. Well, it might be quite powerful, don't get me wrong, but it's relatively speaking, it's a modest measure of energy that re-emerges from the target site, and it taps into a vastly greater measure of energy in this degrading waveform pattern. So they are appropriating this energy, and by interfering their beams at certain locations, they basically can capture some of that energy, bleed it off, and create an earthquake at a certain desired location. This is essentially what's going on, okay? And this is discussed a bit more on some of the articles on my website and in my Occult Physics book. But that is the gist of how earthquakes occur naturally and how scalar beam weapons can be used to generate, if you will, earthquakes. It's not that they generate the total amount of energy for the earthquake. They only generate a modest measure of energy, relatively speaking, at a target site which must have a special relationship to the sun or the celestial bodies, might be the moon, say, but it has to have some special relationship to those celestial bodies, harmonics-wise, connecting up via certain wavelength frequencies to allow for resonant boosting and capture of the natural energy to create these earthquakes. So this is what happened then with the two earthquakes here. What Kim did, running North Korea, I'm laying it down at Kim Jong-un, I'm assuming he's in charge. What he did then, he basically ordered these tests to be done, and the scalar beams were fired underneath the ocean for each one. And they captured the energy roaming around the Earth to produce a 5.0 signature here, and a 5.9 signature here. Now, if you connect up, as I have done, both of these, you will notice something just kind of interesting. The line connecting them up is very close to the border between North Korea and South Korea. Now, when you bear that in mind, and you also note the suspicious replication of this 1948 timestamp, 19 hours 48 minutes, this guy is trying to tell us something. He's trying to put a signal out there to the intelligence agencies of the world about his policies, almost, his desires. Because if you look at this 19 hours 48 minutes not as a timestamp, you look at it in terms of a year, well, 1948 as a year is very significant in Korean history. It's the year when the peninsula was partitioned. Here's a little History Channel blurb here. 1910, Japan formally annexed the Korean peninsula. And during World War II, Japan sent many Korean men to the front as soldiers or forced them to work in wartime factories, while thousands of young Korean women became comfort women, providing sexual services to Japanese soldiers. And in the second paragraph it says, upon Japan's defeat in 1945, the United States and the Soviet Union divided the peninsula into two zones of influence along the 38th parallel, okay? So they've got these zones of influence, okay? But in 1948, everything was formalized. This is when the pro-US Republic of Korea, or South Korea, was established, okay, in Seoul. And this was led by a strong anti-communist. In the industrial north, though, things went different. The Soviets installed the dynamic young communist guerrilla Kim Il-sung, who became the first premier of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And this Kim Il-sung, this is, the line of succession to Kim Jong-un, who's currently the ruler of North Korea. So that 1948 timestamp and the way in which they are both connected, these events, very close to the border, is this guy saying, I've got these brilliant new weapons and I'd love to see a unified peninsula, and I think that these weapons are going to allow me to achieve that, okay? But let's go forwards. The next article, again, is from the Daily Mail Online, and this one, 23rd of September, North Korea is rocked by 3.4 magnitude earthquake that China claims is an explosion. Hours after, rabid dog Trump mocked Madman Kim, but South Korea claims the tremor was natural. Now this tremor, okay, the signature is actually at North Korea's nuclear test site. He's already done all 6 tests by this date, and the 6.3 magnitude Richter scale test, the highest yield one he did, was on the 3rd of September. So this article, as you can see, is the 23rd of September. So this is like 20 days or so afterwards. And so you've got his nuclear test done, 3rd of September, creates this seismic signature, 6.3. Everybody knows that's a nuclear test. But then the official story, becomes the official story, is that due to instability in the ground, some 20 days later, just by chance, there was a further settling of the ground, which resulted in this 3.4 magnitude earthquake. But China's saying, hey, no. This is not a natural earthquake. This is an explosion. What Kim was doing was actually doing a nuclear test, generating a nuclear yield blast via scalar beams. And instead of doing a test out to sea, he decided to do a small one just at his own nuclear test site. That's what happened. And this is registered by the USGS. Although it's not registered as a 3.4, it's given as a 3.6, but this is it here. Now you can see then, we've got these diamonds, and they are the 6 tests that Kim's already done. Okay, these ones here are not highlighted. But then we've got this 3.6, 23rd of September, that's the circle. And that's why I said to you, officially, if it's registered or depicted as a circle, it's considered to be entirely natural. If it's an explosion, and these are all listed as nuclear explosions, they're all given as diamonds, okay? So, bearing that in mind then, let's have a look at the next slide. In this case, I'm going to do an evaluation then of the actual earthquake, this 3.6 as I've just shown, and the Bravo test. This is again the highest yield atmospheric test that the US has ever conducted. So, in this case then, I've got the details for both on screen as derived from the ICE software and also USGS. And in this case, I'm looking at the longitude arc of the North Korean test. That is pure longitude arc between these two values here of the Sun and the event at his nuclear test site, and that's at this longitude here. So the latitudes values are going to be essentially set to 0 in the Great Circle calculator. So if you do the calculation, pure longitude at the equator is this. We're then going to look at the pure latitude separation between the bomb and the Sun for Bravo. And remember how I told you that the values themselves, they're all like interchangeable. Okay, there are certain wavelength measures that fit harmoniously into different arc length measures. And in this case, a simple division sum reveals the following. Look at that. Almost perfect. If we divide the value here, the longitude arc from the North Korean test, by the Bravo nuclear bomb test, we get practically dead on the number 4. Okay? It's a 4-to-1 ratio. And this is what I mean when I say that when you are conducting your scalar beam weapons tests and you're generating these powerful bursts, you are using a boosting effect that is also used with physical nuclear devices. So scalar beam tests have the same kind of energetic signatures, and you can deduce them. You can work out what's unnatural from what is natural based upon an evaluation of the relationship between the event itself and where the Sun is at the time of the event. So, here you can see then, North Korea has got all its ducks in a row almost. And this is where we get to the next critical event. This is from CNN, okay? and it's dated July the 5th, but it's talking about an event that took place essentially day before, especially when you look at North Korean time versus the time zones of other countries. But what it states here is North Korean state media celebrates, quote, gift to American bastards. It says here, North Korean state media is lauding what the country's leader Kim Jong-un has called a, quote, package of gifts for American bastards on their July 4th Independence Day holiday. State media said Kim supervised the launch of Pyongyang's first intercontinental ballistic missile, which it says is powerful enough to reach the US mainland. So, just to rub it into the Americans, their noses in it, he decides to test his first ICBM on the 4th of July, okay? It's reported here, day's the 5th, but he did his test day before. 4th of July, okay? And he's talking about how he's giving the Americans some gifts. Now, it's interesting to note then, he has got everything tested. Everything seemed to have come together for North Korea, for Kim Jong-un, all in 2017. In that year, he's done firstly, 4th of July here, first ICBM test. It's successful. He can reach the US with his delivery system. The same year, just a few days after this is July the 4th, remember July the 12th? That's when he did that scalar beam test, the 5.9 signature, out to sea, okay? The second one he did there. Then, just a few weeks later, September the 3rd, he triggered the 6.3 signature, revealing a high-yield thermonuclear warhead had been developed. Check on that. 20 days after that, he did a controlled scalar beam test to generate a nuclear blast, one that gave a signature of 3.6 on the Richter scale at his own nuclear test site. He did everything deliberately in just a couple of months to test all his systems, okay? Very clever. He's got all his ducks in a row, did it all. So, here's the pop quiz for you, especially for you Americans out there. If he has the capability to intersect scalar beams under the oceans, just off the Korean peninsula, and generate significant blasts which have, essentially, nuclear-type yields, does he have the ability to target, say, the United States itself, and generate nuclear yield blasts and attack the US? Is he capable of doing this? The answer is absolutely yes. And what I'm about to show you is decisive proof that he has already done this. So, let's go to what's just happened over the previous 12 months. This is from USGS for the entire year from the 1st of January 2019 to the 31st of December 2019. A full 365 days of all earthquakes that occurred within the US, absent Hawaii and Alaska, which are 4.5 and above, okay? Now, they're not all listed here on the screen, it won't fit, but you'll see here it says 49 of 49, okay? So you've had 49 earthquakes for the entire year, 4.5 and above. But you'll notice if you just look here in California, quite a concentration, okay? So let's just zoom in a bit. Here we are. This is the concentration. This is 36 of the 49. And you'll also notice two particularly big blobs here. Well, that is what we have when we zoom in just a little bit further. These are the two biggest earthquakes to have struck the US for the whole of the year. The first that occurred is the 6.4 and the 7.1. Now, for all you Americans out there, when exactly did the first 6.4 occur? And if you look here according to USGS, wouldn't you just know it? The 4th of July, 2019. You know how Kim set off his successful ICBM test on the 4th of July, 2017? Well, wouldn't you just know it? Biggest earthquake of the year occurs 6.4 right on the 4th of July. 2 days later, on the 6th of July, you then have this even bigger one, the 7.1, and they occur just a few miles from one another. How interesting. How interesting. But where did these earthquakes occur? Well, they occurred in California, obviously. Did they occur anywhere of significance? Well, if you plug these coordinates into Google Earth, you can put the precise blobs mapped onto Google Earth and show where they occurred. And if you do that, you get the following. You'll see the 6.4 here and the 7.1 here. And right here, what's this? Naval Air Weapons Station. And you can see this runway type thing here. This is a US military facility. And these earthquakes were practically dead on this facility. In terms of scaling, I can tell you the 7.1 is about 8 miles from this runway thing here, okay? Just 8 miles, that's all. That's very close, dangerously close. And then you got the 6.4 here. But this is a massive range here, you know. It's not just the runway bit. So, let's have a look at some details regarding this site. This is the Wikipedia blurb, and you can see the runway right here. So, it says, Naval Air Weapons Station at China Lake. It is a large military installation whose mission is to support the research, testing and evaluation programs of the US Navy. And it goes on to say, China Lake is the United States Navy's largest single landholding, representing 85% of the Navy's land for weapons and armaments research, development, acquisition, testing and evaluation, and use, and 38% of the Navy's land holdings worldwide. In total, its 2 ranges and main sites cover more than 1,100,000 acres, an area larger than the state of Rhode Island. And as of 2010, at least 95% of that land has been left undeveloped. The roughly $3 billion infrastructure of the installation consists of 2,132 buildings and facilities, and 329 miles of paved roads and unpaved roads. So this is like a massive facility. And somebody's already updated the Wikipedia, and you can just see here. 7.1 magnitude earthquake, July 5th, 2019. Now it says July the 5th here because this is local time. When registering, everybody uses universal time. Because in Britain here we are between 5 and 8 hours in front of the US, depending on east or west coast. That's why it's listed as July the 6th, but they've given the local time here, yeah. So it's 7.1 magnitude earthquake whose epicenter was within the bounds of the facility. Resulted in the facility being evaluated as, quote, not mission capable. It was pretty much massively crippled. Let's have a look. This is from the Weather Channel. Earthquake damage at California Navy base could top $5.2 billion. It was really bad. The twin earthquakes that rattled Southern California last month caused up to $5.2 billion in damages to the China Lake Navy base, according to estimates in a report released Wednesday by the base. The report cites extensive damage among the nearly 3,600 facilities at the base, including 1,341 buildings, as well as infrastructure, water supplies, power. And, it goes on to say, base is the Navy's largest single landholding, research and testing facility for many of the military's most advanced weapons. And it ends, the report released Wednesday notes that many of the damaged facilities are highly specialized. Some just need repairs, whilst others will need to be completely demolished and rebuilt. This is a massive attack upon a major facility, and I say attack because these 2 earthquakes were absolutely not natural. No way. And I'm going to show you now the nuclear type signature, and that they have a very close relationship, these 2 earthquakes, to the following nuclear test site. This is Amchitka Island, employed by the United States, where they tested quite a few high-yield devices. And you're looking at a device known as Canakin. And this stands on record as being the highest yield underground test the United States has ever conducted. And this was on the 6th of November 1971, 2200 hours. Now you can see in the background here, it's one of the Aleutian Islands that just trail off Alaska basically. And that's where the device was set up according to the nuclear archives. And this line here is part of this line here, which depicts the great circle arc between the bomb and the sun, which is this 4,924 mile value, okay? So, let's have a look at this in more detail. Firstly, we're going to look at the details of Canakin here on the right and compare them to the details of the 4th of July earthquake, which is on the left here. Well, again, this is taken, the details are taken direct in terms of the time, the signature, and the location of the epicenter straight from USGS. The Interactive Computer Ephemeris, the US Naval Observatory's own software, gives us the sun, and we work out the great circle arcs as follows. And from the historical records, this is what we've got for Canakin, a 5 megaton device. So I want to draw your attention to the relationship between the direct arc here in miles between the sun and the epicenter of the quake, July the 4th, and the direct arc between the bomb and the sun for Canakin. You can see here that we have a ratio 2.16, almost dead on, okay? You can just see it's 2.1600693881. The error rate, if you were to say adjust the value here by just 835 feet, less than a fifth of a mile or so, it would make the ratio perfectly 2.16, which is 54 divided by 25. Now, as I mentioned quite a bit on my website, I look into the physics of the Babylonian mathematical systems. This 2.16 is a part of the numeric sequence you get if you just start multiplying the number 6 by itself multiple times. So 6 times 6 is 36, times 6 again is 216, and it's of the same sequence. And this would appear to be encoding a waveform pattern which fits harmoniously into both of these two measures, okay? So if you essentially divide this value here, 4924, by 54, and you divide this value here, the 2279, by 25, you get the wavelength measure accompanied by a specific frequency, harmoniously fits into both, and this is the one that they were employing, right? This is what was significant to generate or contribute to the nuclear explosion of Canakin, and also to boost the scalar beam blast, the interference zone, to generate this 6.4 earthquake. And you can see again the 6.4 earthquake, if you use a formula for conversion, and these formulas, I know that there is some dispute over just how accurate, you can tweak them here and there, but the one I'm using will give you a nice ballpark estimate. And this is the yield. This here is this 157,517 tons of TNT. Effectively, it's 10 times the power of the Hiroshima blast for a 6.4 quake. So this is like the nuclear yield of the earthquake that struck the China Lake facility, okay? Now let's go on a bit further. In this case, I've just got the details for the 7.1 earthquake that occurred 2 days later, okay? And here we have the event itself. Again, these are the coordinates of the epicenter. And at that precise time there, the coordinates of the sun. Now this was the 7.1 yield, so if you look here, the nuclear yield of this blast for this earthquake, okay, that occurred just a few miles down, this is nearly a megaton. It's nearly 1 million tons of TNT, right? 825,000 tons or so. So this is a far more significant blast than the other one. Now, you'll notice then here, what we've got is a depiction of just the pure latitude arc of separation between the event and the sun. So longitude's not a factor here. So I know this is looking like a three-dimensional picture of the Earth, but you've got to look at it two dimensions. You've got the North Pole line here, the axis of the Earth, North Pole to the centre, and you've got the equator. So the pure latitude arc essentially is the angular measure from the equator up to here, to this point, which is to the sun, 22.85. And if you went from the equator up to here, this point here, that's 35.7, okay? So the surface arc length, two-dimensionally between these two latitude values under the WGS system, is this value here, 889.34212 miles, okay? Again, accurate to 5 places after decimal point. So again, we're using the equatorial circumference of the Earth, the WGS84 model. So, what happens then if we do a simple division sum? Equator divided by this latitude arc. Look at that. It's practically a perfect harmonic fit, 28 times. This value here, the 889 value, fits into the equatorial circumference of the Earth almost with perfection, 28 times. And these are exactly the kinds of special relations that you get, and which link up these events to the Earth. This is a very powerful resonant event. It's like with the Hiroshima example I spoke about previously. That was where we were looking at the longitude separation arc fitting into the equator 6 times when that device was activated. Here, it's a nice fit to the equator again, this time 28 times. So the 889 here represents the wavelength measure that they were after, which was conducive to really helping to boost the scalar beam interaction to trigger this high yield blast, which so devastated the facility. So, let's move on. Now here in this next slide then, we've got all US earthquakes, and this time, instead of it being 4.5 and above, I'm looking at 2.5 and above magnitude earthquakes. Still for the full year, 2019. And so this line here, this side, is the beginning of the year, and this line here is the end of the year. Now, because the earthquakes are all listed from an Excel spreadsheet, and each earthquake is of equal sort of value, it's not a uniform time from the graph itself. So, as you can see in this little section here, this section here, from here to here, following the 7.1 earthquake, this constitutes just 1 hour and 25 minutes, where we had 227 quakes occur, aftershocks that followed the 7.1. And this little interval here is a significant interval for the entire graph. But as I say, it only covers 1 hour and 25 minutes, so that's what I mean by it not being uniform in terms of time. So, we've got the 2 earthquakes here, and I just want to draw your attention to this interesting little fact here. The 6.4 one, you'll see that the little spike here, you've got this like white area right here, okay? And more pronounced with the 7.1, you've got another like white area. What's going on here is that when the scalar beams are intersected and the earthquake burst, emerges, that area is somewhat destabilized. And what you have is a heightened energetic condition where a scattering of natural type aftershocks will start occurring, okay? They're not targeted with the precision of your main blast. Your main blast is totally artificial and targeted, but it creates a destabilized area where you have a scattering of aftershocks. And you can see that all the earthquakes that followed for the first hour and 25 minutes in this aftershock, right, they were all pretty high, and they had to drop down and before they started being random scattering of aftershocks, but now back to, you could say, normal. At least they were no longer as pronounced. So this is the kind of thing that went on. So what I want to draw your attention to then is this. I have basically told you that these 2 big earthquakes were an attack. Who did it, though? Who was behind it? Well, it turns out that the best case is North Korea. And Kim Jong-un appears to have written his signature into this to really sign his name to it. And this is what I'm going to now show you, the proof of this. So, total number of earthquakes then, for the full year covering the US, 2.5 and above, 4,430, okay? You can download the entire list as an Excel spreadsheet. I did, because this is it. And you see at the top here, 4430. So here they all are listed. Now, when we were looking at the 2 seismic signatures, which were off the coast of Korea, and they both had this 19 hours 48 minutes timestamp, right? We know that Kim Jong-un likes his 1948 timestamps. So on a little bit of a hunch, I decided to look at the full range of all 4,430 earthquakes and say, do any of them begin with 19 hours 48 minutes? The answer is yes. 7 do, okay? And these 7, they all occurred beginning with a 19 hours 48 minute timestamp on separate days. What are the odds of 2 occurring within 24 hours, one after the other? Well, this one, the first one here to occur, occurred on the 6th of July. And with this timestamp, it occurred several hours after the 7.1 earthquake, okay? And then 24 hours later or so, on the 7th of July, we had another one, okay? Also begin 19 hours, 48 minutes. So, these look to be part of the natural scattering of aftershocks, okay? And you might look at these and think, yeah, they are natural, totally natural. But there's something that makes me think they are absolutely unnatural, and that they were highly targeted and produced with precision, just as much as the 6.4 and 7.1 earthquakes were highly targeted. So, what I want to do is look at these timestamps for these two and compare them to the timestamps for the 2 seismic signatures off the coast of North Korea. And here's what we get. Look at the first one. 19 hours, 48 minutes, 8 seconds. And this here, 19 hours, 48 minutes, 8 seconds. And the second one, 19 hours, 48 minutes, 36 seconds. And here, 19 hours, 48 minutes, 36 seconds. A perfect match. And this is the US GS talking. This is me pressing print screen button. Okay? I did a presentation with Kerry Cassidy, it might have been a year or so ago, where I mentioned these and I did screen prints of it, and this is what you get. So these are slides using the values from the screen prints. I will just say one little point, because sometimes, you know, and if anybody wants to check my work on this, sometimes when you look at some of the solutions, they sometimes modify them. And you'll see with this one here, you know how it says 1948-08? I recently had a look at USGS for this one here, and do you know what they did? They appear to have just knocked it down to 07, you know what I mean? This 8 here was an 07. I thought, well, I don't know why they've done that, but they did. And I only came across this because I just looked recently, but I had the timestamps here where it said 08, and it's perfect match to this one. This one here that says 36 ends 36, this one here, I just checked recently, this one's still 36. So I just have to point that out in case anybody's a bit finicky and wants to check. But when I pressed the print screen buttons, this was, again, over a year ago, that was 08, and it is a perfect match to that one. And this one begins 36, and this one's a perfect match there. But when you look at these two things then, it's like a signature. It's as if he has been clever and he's decided to bury his signature to say, you know, I did these attacks. I did these big earthquakes, 6.4 and the 7.1, and in the natural scattering of aftershocks, he's buried 2 highly targeted additional earthquakes, and he's used the same timestamps as the scalar beam tests just off the Korean Peninsula coast. And on that point, let's just have a look at these 2 low-yield earthquakes there are in the scattering of the natural aftershocks. So let's look at the first one here. This is the big one that set it all going, right? This is the 7.1, okay? And all these others that occurred, they occurred after the 7.1, okay? They occurred up here. So this is what you're dealing with, hundreds basically. And if we look at the first of those small earthquakes then, we get the following. Is here. That's the one there, that little one there. That's the one with the 1948-08 timestamp. It was a 2.8 signature energy, which only gives you 31.44 tons. That's like it's like a conventional explosive, you know, a significant missile or bomb, which is conventional. So that's all it is, you know. He's just burying his signature with some low-level blasts here. So that's the TNT yield here, and this is where it was located, the 2.8. And if we go further, let's have a look at the signature and evaluate the signature of the 2.8. here are the details, and we've got the direct arc here and the latitude arc. And in this case, we've got relations for both of these with the Hiroshima bomb and Bravo. So, for Hiroshima, the equator of the Earth to where the bomb was located at Hiroshima is this value here in miles. If a simple division that by the direct arc for the North Korean attack here on the US on the 6th of July, and you get this 2.6, almost dead on. This is the basic fraction 13/5, and there's the error. For Bravo, even better, even more significant. You know how we use the Bravo ratio 4:1 for his scalar beam test on his own site, the 3.61? Well, here, for this 2.81, if you look at the latitude arc of Bravo itself, that is from the bomb to the sun, the pure latitude arc for Bravo, that's the value, 1353 miles. And if you divide it by the identical same latitude arc for this scalar beam test, either signature, the epicenter to the sun, 902, you almost get dead on 1.5, the basic fraction 3/2. Here it's 1881 feet error, okay? But such a basic fraction, it's blatant really. Now let's have a look at the next one. This was the 3.0 one. This is the one which ends in 36 seconds, yeah? 19 hours, 48 minutes, 36 seconds, and that's here. The other one was about here, so it's slightly, they're grouped together very close. And the nuclear yield here is 50.46, still a low yield. Now in this case, I'm not going to evaluate the signature of this device in terms of the epicenter yield relations. I'm actually going to show you that what appears to have happened here is that this specific epicenter was so precisely positioned as to actually have a direct connection with one of the seismic signatures, the 5.9 signature, for the scalar beam test off the coast of Korea. And here, what I want you to look at are just the coordinates of the epicenters for both events. Here's the globe, and here you can just see the Korean peninsula here. This blue blob here, that's where the coordinates were for the 5.9 magnitude earthquake, the underwater test. Those coordinates there. The 3.0, small little targeted earthquake blast in the scattering of aftershocks for the 2019 event. So they're both two events 2 years apart or so, right? But this is just following the 7.1 earthquake. So that's the red blob here. That's just in the United States, in California. So the direct great circle arc connecting them is this value here. Well, we have a series of remarkably accurate relations connecting up this value. And they are related to King and Kanakin, two bombs I've already discussed. And these are incredible relations, these. So for King, the equator to the bomb arc is this one here, 974.528 miles. And if we divide this value here, great circle arc connecting the two events, by the King, we get almost dead on the number 7. 93 feet adjustment for perfection. Again, still with King, this time the bomb to sun latitude arc. That's this value here. Again, simple division. What do we get? Almost dead on 2.6 recurring. That's the basic fraction 8 divided by 3. We've seen before a few times now. The error rate here, the adjustment to perfect the ratio, 976 feet. And then we've got Kanakin, and this is even more brilliant. The bomb to sun longitude arc for Kanakin is this, divided by distance here, practically dead on, 1/3, 707 feet. So this guy is going out of his way to tell the US, look, I can target your country with precision timing to the second, and I can target areas inside your country and generate high or even low magnitude earthquakes with incredible precision. Place them right where he wants. He is encoding the capabilities that he has in these tests and telling you that he can get from his own peninsula right to the US with high precision, okay? This is what he is actually saying. So, let's just go on a bit further because there's more encoding to be had. So here's the guy himself on this horse. I think he's trying to look like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. Anyway, so another CNN article. We've got all these gifts. He keeps promising these gifts here. So, North Korea warns US to prepare for Christmas gift, but no one's sure what to expect. Now this one is from the 5th of December 2019. So this is just a few weeks ago. Again, he's talking about gifts. So, it says here, North Korea will send a Christmas gift to the United States, but what that present contains will depend on the outcome of ongoing talks between Washington and Pyongyang, a top official has warned. The ominous comments, which some have interpreted as a sign that North Korea could resume long-distance missile tests, comes as the clock ticks closer to the country's self-imposed end-of-year deadline for nuclear negotiations with the Trump administration. So there's all kinds of sanctions presently on North Korea because, it's axis of evil and all that, whatever. And so they're always doing these talks and wanting him to give up his nukes and all the rest of it. Now, in this case then, this article, as I said, it's the 5th of December. And so he's talking about this gifts. The last time we had this mention of gifts was when, on the 4th of July 2017, he did his first ICBM test, okay? Well, everybody then is thinking maybe he's going to fire some new missile tests. Well, what happened in the aftermath of this story is pretty much nothing. Everybody was just thinking, he was just talking, we haven't got anything. Well, as a matter of fact, he did indeed send the United States a gift. He didn't do it on Christmas Day precisely. He did it on Boxing Day, the 26th of December. Let's have a look. Now remember I said there were 7 earthquakes which had signatures beginning with the timestamp 19 hours and 48 minutes and some measure of seconds. 2 of them were in July, the ones I've just discussed, and the others were scattered around at various different dates. But one of them occurred close to the end of the year on the 26th of December. This is 19 hours, 48 minutes and 23 seconds. And this is it here. It's in California. And it's a 3.6 seismic signature, which 208 tons of TNT. It's like a large quarry blast. It's still conventional. Even though it's a nuclear generator blast, don't get me wrong. It's essentially on par with a conventional explosive. So we've got the precise coordinates for it and everything. You can see here from the USGS. So let's just have a look in detail. This is where the event is located, right? 26th of December 2019, precise time there. And at that moment there, at that location then, the sun is at these coordinates here. It's off screen, I've not depicted it. But I just wanted to show you in Google Earth essentially where this blob is, and it's kind of on the same latitude close to San Francisco, okay, where all those tech companies are. These then, here you can see, are the great circle arc lengths related to the location here and the sun. Direct arc between them, latitude and longitude arc, right? And the direct and latitude arcs are very close, just by way of interest, but let's go a bit further. We know that North Korea has done tests related to Chinese tests. So, I've already spoke about the highest yield Chinese test and shown you how the very first nuclear test in 2006 that North Korea did is strongly related to it. And to this very measure here, okay? Well, we have more to say about relations involving this measure, this 2,800 mile value from the equator to the bomb for the Chinese test, and in this case the measures linked into the 26th December 2019 little mini earthquake. So what we're going to look at then is the ratio between these two values here. Okay, the latitude arc between the seismic signature and the sun for this one and the Chinese one. Look at that. Practically a perfect 1.5, 3/2 ratio. And the error that perfects it, 391 feet. Very small. Now, why is all of this so significant? What is the message? This test here, right, I say test, it's essentially an attack. It is a nuclear yield, although albeit a small yield, blast targeting the US. It's got his favourite timestamp beginning 1948, and he's done this specifically on the 26th of December 2019. This is his Christmas gift. And in that article it talks about the breakdown maybe of these talks with Trump, you know. What Kim Jong-un is actually communicating with this blast is what his response will be if the United States were to attack North Korea. He is telling you exactly what his response is going to be. Now, he already seems to have triggered these two massive earthquakes at the China Lake facility, and I would add this much. I do think that he was behind them because he set off his first ICBM test on the 4th of July 2017, and then we have this massive earthquake attack beginning 4th of July 2019. It fits his MO, okay? It fits his MO, which is why I think he was behind the attack. Now, noting that it is at a place called China Lake might make you think, well, maybe the Chinese did it, and North Korea just did those two small little, earthquakes in the scattered aftermath. Those two little earthquakes there embedded in the big mix. I don't think so. That's the weaker solution for me. I think North Korea did it because it fits his MO, but he chose to target a place, I think, at China Lake because he wants to communicate to the US that, hey, China is totally okay with me attacking you. They're turning a blind eye to this. I think that's part of the message as well, and that's why he chose this facility, not just because it's a military facility, but I think he chose to attack the US there because he wanted to communicate this fact that China is completely okay with this. But knowing that he likes to pick dates which have significant historical meanings, there's a reason why Kim decided to do this particular attack here on the 26th of December 2019, because he wants us all to cast our minds back to the 26th of December of a different year, specifically 2004. And what happened there? Well, 2004, Boxing Day, 26th of December, a massive 9.1 earthquake occurred in Sumatra, just near Indonesia. And this caused the famous tsunami, which swept throughout the Indian Ocean, and it went right up to the coast of India and also Sri Lanka, and killed about 250,000 people. The big waves came inland. It was devastating. And you can see here that there's actually two earthquakes listed. One of them is an 8.1. This one occurred on the 23rd, and the big 9.1 occurred here. You can see this was near. This is in the Indian Ocean. This is what was so devastating to the people in India. This one was Southern Ocean. It did not cause anywhere near the same kind of devastation. Okay, the big tsunami one was the 9.1. And just as another point, the energy difference between a single point difference in these is 32 times. So the 9.1 is 32 times more powerful than the 8.1. This is like a logarithmic scale, you see. But you can see the solutions here then. These are USGS solutions, okay? Even though I'm in the Australian, in this case I'm not in the USGS database. This is the Australian official database. They've got better maps though. But anyway, so here we are then. We're in the Australian one, and that's the precise location. Now I've put the big number in the big blob. But these solutions here, these are like contributions from the USGS, even though they're listed on the Australian database. And I will just say, I've had to engage in a bit of cleverness here, because The one I'm drawing your attention to is the 26th of December one. And you see how the coordinates are 3.298 and 95.779 longitude. If you actually want to check my work and you go to this site and you search for this earthquake, these two numbers are rounded up, okay? It'll just say 3.3 here for latitude, and here it'll just say 95.78. They're kind of rounded to the nearest two figures. So if you click this export button, export CV, you can download as a spreadsheet the solution, and if you do that, it gives you the more accurate values, which is 3.298 and 95.779. You'll only get that if you export the solution. So what I've done here, a bit clever, I've taken the exported solution and I've inputted the numbers here and replaced the rounded up ones with the more accurate ones. But I want to definitely give you the precise solution because this is part of the message, okay? Why did Kim attack the precise place he did in California on the 26th of December 2019? And the answer is he wanted to set up a very special arc length measure relationship between that location and the coordinates of this Sumatran earthquake, which is on the 26th of December 2004. All part of sending his message. So let's just go further. Here are the actual coordinates then of both. Both on the 26th of December, one's 2019, this is Kim's little earthquake event here in the US, this red blob. And then we've got the Sumatra earthquake. This is the green blob, which is here. They're both right at the edge of the planet, but that's the Great Circle Arc between them. Very accurate using the ellipsoid model, the WGS84 model. And it's 8,853 miles, and again accurate to 5 places after the decimal point. So, there's a very special ratio that we can get between this value and the equatorial circumference of the Earth. A simple division reveals this here. 0.35555, almost perfectly 5s all the way, which is the basic fraction 16 over 45, an error rate just 208 feet, okay? Now, just to throw in an additional connection which is linked into this, if we actually look then at the signature arc measures associated purely with the December 26th, 2019 earthquake, the 3.6 that Kim targeted in California, with the event, the epicenter here and the sun here, look at the direct arc, okay? And let's just divide the equator by the direct arc, and you can see the value we have here. It looks pretty innocuous, doesn't it? 5.925, it just looks almost random. However, you know I was talking about one of the previous sequences about using the number 6 to step up. You go from 6 times 6 is 36, times 6 again, 216. Well, if you take this value here, and you just step up effectively, multiply it by 6, what do you get? Look at the sequence. 35.55, it's almost exactly 35.5 recurring. And the error rate, just 915 feet. So again, just compare that with the previous slide. It's the same sequence, essentially. You're just shifting the decimal point. So, we have a clear link here between the 26th of December 2019, where Kim gave his so-called Christmas gift on Boxing Day, and the Sumatran earthquake, which occurred 26th of December 2004. So what Kim is doing then is basically saying, if these talks go bad with the US, and the US attacks him, his response will be to trigger a massive earthquake just off the shore of the United States and trigger a tsunami. And if we look at the latitude arc that he's actually put his earthquake at here, 37.582, the indication seems to be that his primary point of attack, the city that he would most want to destroy, is San Francisco, where all the tech companies are and what have you, okay? That's the target. And what he's done with his attacks on the 4th of July and the 6th of July, he's demonstrated the ability to transmit high-yield nuclear blasts, okay, subsurface with high precision, and that the US is vulnerable to these weapons. And so this is what he's done. He's decided to say, look, I'm giving you a nice little message here that if you attack, my response is going to be to trigger a massive earthquake on par with the Sumatran earthquake and essentially take out probably San Francisco on the west coast. And I would say it's a very credible threat. Very credible. You know, I think that he does have the weapon systems, and this is what he's done. He's proven it. Now, everything I'm telling you here is a very high-level, in-depth analysis of public information. But it is obscure information. I'm sure that the intelligence agencies of various countries know everything that I'm saying and understand the message that's being communicated, you know. So I just put it out there. I think that this is a credible threat, and this is what his response will be, and I think he's got the weapon systems to carry out this threat if North Korea is attacked. And I just wanted to end by saying, you know, the United States is not exactly innocent in this. They too have attacked countries with these weapons and caused a lot of devastation in turn. So, for the United States to be attacked by these weapons, well, I can tell you it is what it is. But we do appear to have a kind of a secret nuclear war going on behind the scenes, where countries are attacking one another with nuclear blasts which are subsurface, and they're registering as seismic signatures, and it's like everybody is just not acknowledging it. They all know they're being attacked, but they're all remaining silent about it. But you have a secret nuclear war going off. Okay, so that's what I'd say, guys, you know.
So that's it, guys, and all I want to say is, if you're interested in my research, links in the description box, and please go ahead and purchase a copy of my book. It goes into a lot more depth regarding nuclear weapons tests, and I do present a more in-depth analysis of some of the bombs that you've actually seen in this particular video. So with that said, we'll leave it there.